The massive ship drifted silently through space, bigger than most moons. Its dark metal hull stretched for miles in every direction, covered with weapon ports that could destroy entire planets. This was the Eternal Dominion, flagship of the Zephyrian, Galactic Empire, and it had never known defeat. Admiral Korvac stood on the bridge, his three yellow eyes focused on the holographic display floating before him. His reptilian body towered over his crew, scales glittering like black diamonds under the bridge lights. Each of his clawed hands was large enough to crush a human skull, though he had never seen a human before today. "Show me the third planet. Again," he hissed to his second-in-command. Commander Vex pressed several buttons on his control panel. The hologram changed to show a blue and green world spinning slowly in space. White clouds swirled across its surface, and a single small moon orbited nearby. "This is their homeworld," Commander Vex said. "They call it Earth. Population approximately 8 billion of the creatures called humans." Admiral Korvac studied the planet with growing annoyance. It looked so ordinary, so peaceful. No massive defense platforms orbited it. No fleets of warships patrolled its space. No energy shields protected it from attack. It was exactly like every other primitive world the Empire had conquered. "Have they responded to our ultimatum?" Admiral Korvac asked. "Yes, sir. They have refused to surrender for the third time." Admiral Korvac's tail lashed back and forth, a sign of his rising anger. In his long career, he had conquered 847 worlds for the Empire. Some species surrendered the moment they saw his fleet approaching. Others tried to fight and were crushed within hours. None had ever dared to refuse surrender 3 times. "What reason did they give?" he asked. Commander Vex looked uncomfortable. "They said, and I quote, 'Thanks, but no thanks. We're good.'" The bridge fell silent. Several crew members looked at each other nervously. In the Empire's long history, no species had ever responded to a demand for surrender with such casual dismissal. Admiral Korvac's 3 eyes narrowed. "Show me their military strength." The hologram changed again, displaying charts and numbers. Commander Vex began reading from his reports. "Their most advanced weapons appear to be chemical explosives and metal projectiles fired from tubes. Their largest ships are approximately 1,000 feet long. Their population seems to be divided into separate groups that occasionally fight each other with primitive weapons." "Primitive weapons?" Admiral Korvac repeated. "Yes, sir. They still use chemical propellants to launch metal objects at each other. Some of their conflicts involve creatures actually running toward their enemies while carrying sharp metal objects." Admiral Korvac would have laughed if he understood the concept. The idea of creatures voluntarily running toward danger was so alien to him that he couldn't process it properly. Meanwhile, on Earth, something very different was happening. President Jake Morrison sat in the Situation Room deep under the White House, surrounded by his top advisors. The holographic message from the Zephyrian Empire played on the main screen for the 4th time. The aliens' ultimatum was clear and simple. Surrender within 72 hours or face complete destruction. Secretary of Defense Lisa Kane was the first to break the silence. She started with a small chuckle, then covered her mouth with her hand. Within seconds, she was laughing so hard that tears ran down her cheeks. General Pete Sullivan shook his head and grinned. "Well, that's new. Usually people threaten us with things that are actually scary." President Morrison wiped his eyes and looked around the room. "Has anyone shown them the files yet?" "What files, sir?" asked the Secretary of State. "The history files. You know, World War II, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. The fun stuff." Lisa Kane pulled out her tablet and started scrolling through classified military databases. "Should we send them the highlight reel or the complete collection?" "Oh, definitely the complete collection," President Morrison said. "I want them to understand exactly what they're dealing with." At that moment, halfway around the world, Dr. Amy Clark was giving a lecture to her physics students at MIT. The news of the alien ultimatum had just broken on every television and internet feed on the planet. One of her students raised his hand. "Professor Clark, shouldn't we be worried about this alien invasion?" Dr. Clark smiled and pulled up a new presentation on her laptop. "Well, let's think about this logically. These aliens claim to have conquered 847 worlds. That's impressive. But here's the thing they probably don't know about humans. She clicked to the first slide, which showed a timeline of human history. We've been at war with someone or something for our entire existence as a species. We've had approximately 14,500 wars in recorded history. We've never had a single year of global peace. We've turned conflict into entertainment, competition into art, and violence into a science. Another student raised her hand. But they have advanced technology. They can travel between stars. True, Dr. Clark replied. But technology isn't everything in warfare. Let me ask you this. If you had to fight someone, would you rather fight a species that has never lost a war, or a species that has never stopped fighting wars? The students looked confused. Dr. Clark continued. These aliens have conquered 847 worlds. That means they fought 847 different species, and every single one of those species surrendered. They've never had to adapt, never had to innovate, never had to overcome a truly challenging opponent. They've gotten comfortable. She clicked to the next slide, which showed images of human military technology. We, on the other hand, have been fighting each other for 10,000 years. Every war has taught us something new. Every enemy has shown us new weaknesses to exploit. Every battle has added to our knowledge of how to fight and win. High above Earth, in the International Space Station, Commander Rick Hayes was having a similar conversation with Mission Control. Control, you seeing the sensor readings on these alien ships? Copy that, Station. We're tracking approximately 500 vessels of various sizes. Commander Hayes looked out the window at the distant points of light that represented the alien fleet. Control, I've got a question. Do they seriously think those are warships? Come again, Station? I'm looking at their fleet composition. It's all wrong. They've got their biggest ships in front arranged in a perfect geometric pattern. It's like they're more interested in looking impressive than actually fighting. Down in Mission Control, the flight director pulled up the tactical analysis on his screen. Station, what are you seeing that we're missing? Well, for starters, they're not moving. They're just sitting there in formation like they're on parade, and their energy signatures suggest they're running minimal power to their weapon systems. It's like they expect us to surrender just because they showed up. The flight director thought about this. Station, in your professional military opinion, how would you rate their tactical positioning? Commander Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then he started laughing. Control, I've seen better tactical planning at a high school football game. These guys have no idea what they're dealing with. Back on the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Korvax was preparing his final ultimatum to the humans. He had decided to be generous and give them one more chance to surrender before he began the destruction of their world. Open a communication channel to the human leadership, he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what appeared to be a simple room on Earth. A human male sat behind a wooden desk wearing a dark suit and a red tie. This was President Morrison, though Admiral Korvax didn't know his name or title. Greetings, creature, Admiral Korvax began. I am Admiral Korvax of the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. This is your final opportunity to surrender before we demonstrate the full power of our fleet. President Morrison looked directly into the camera and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Admiral Korvax, I appreciate you reaching out. Before we give you our final answer, I'd like to send you a small gift. Consider it a token of Earth's hospitality, a data packet transmitted from Earth to the alien flagship. Commander Vex quickly analyzed it and reported to Admiral Korvax. Sir, it appears to be historical records of some kind. Military engagements, tactical analyses, weapon specifications. Show me, Admiral Korvax ordered. The holographic display filled with images and data from human military history. Admiral Korvax saw primitive creatures using simple weapons to fight each other in conflicts that seemed to serve no logical purpose. He watched recordings of humans deliberately running toward enemy fire, throwing themselves on explosive devices, and continuing to fight even when severely wounded. This must be propaganda, he told Commander Vex. No species behaves this way in actual combat. President Morrison's voice came through the communication channel again. Admiral, that was just the introduction. We call it The Art of War, a Human Perspective. Now here's our final answer to your ultimatum. The transmission ended. A few seconds later, a single word appeared on every screen aboard the Eternal Dominion. It was translated into every language the Empire knew, but the meaning was the same in all of them. No. Admiral Korvax stared at the word for a long moment. Then he turned to his crew. Prepare the fleet for battle. It's time to show these humans what happens to species that defy the Empire. But as he gave the order, Admiral Korvax couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. The Zephyrian fleet moved into Earth's solar system like a dark cloud blotting out the stars. 500 massive ships arranged themselves in perfect formation, each one bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. Admiral Korvax stood on his bridge, watching the third planet grow larger on his screens. Deploy the intimidation formation, he ordered. The fleet shifted into a pattern that had caused countless species to surrender without firing a single shot. The largest ships formed the outer ring, their weapon ports glowing with deadly energy. Smaller vessels filled the gaps between them, creating a wall of metal and firepower that stretched across space. Sir, Commander Vex reported, we're receiving a transmission from a human vessel. Show me. A small ship appeared on the main screen. Compared to the massive Zephyrian warships, it looked like a toy. Its hull was smooth and white, with blue markings along its sides. The name painted on its nose read Defiant. That's their response to our fleet? Admiral Korvax asked. One small ship? It appears so, sir. The communication channel opened, and a human face appeared on the screen. The creature had short brown hair, bright blue eyes, and was smiling. This was Captain Tony Park, though Admiral Korvax didn't know his name. Hello there, the human said cheerfully. Welcome to our solar system. I'm Captain Park. Nice ships you've got there. Very shiny. Admiral Korvax leaned forward, his three eyes narrowing. Human, you are facing the combined might of the Zephyrian Empire. Surrender now and your death will be quick. Captain Park's smile grew wider. Oh, that's very kind of you to offer. But before we get started with all the fighting and dying, I've got a question. Have you guys ever fought humans before? The question caught Admiral Korvax off guard. We have conquered 847 worlds. We have crushed every species that dared to oppose us. Right, but humans specifically, Captain Park interrupted. Because we're kind of special. See, we've been fighting each other since we learned how to pick up rocks. We've turned warfare into an art form. We've made it our favorite hobby. Admiral Korvax's tail began to twitch with annoyance. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our ships. Your single vessel cannot defeat our fleet. Oh, you're absolutely right about that, Captain Park agreed. One ship definitely can't defeat 500 ships. That would be impossible. Admiral. Korvax felt satisfied. Finally, the human was showing proper fear. However, Captain Park continued, who said anything about one ship? That's when Admiral Korvax noticed something odd about his sensor readings. The space around the human ship seemed to be shifting. Ripples appeared in what should have been empty vacuum, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. What is that? He demanded. Captain Park checked something on his control panel. Oh, that's just our friends decloaking. We thought it might be rude to sneak up on you. The space around the Defiant suddenly filled with ships. Not just a few ships, but hundreds of them. They appeared out of nowhere, as if they had been invisible moments before. Each one was different from the others, as if humans couldn't agree on what a warship should look like. Some were sleek and fast, looking more like racing cars than military vessels. Others were massive and heavily armored, covered in weapon turrets and thick metal plating. A few appeared to be nothing more than engines with enormous guns attached to them. Cloaking technology? Commander Vex whispered. Impossible, Admiral Korvax replied. No species has developed perfect invisibility, Captain. Park's voice came through the communication channel again. Actually, it's not cloaking. It's something we call phase shifting. We learned it from quantum physics. Really handy for getting into places where you're not supposed to be. Admiral Korvax had heard enough. All ships, open fire on the human vessels. Destroy them all. The Zephyrian fleet unleashed a barrage of energy weapons that could have melted mountains. Beams of purple light lanced through space toward the human ships, carrying enough power to vaporize anything they touched. The humans did something no other species had ever done when faced with overwhelming firepower. They didn't run. They didn't try to hide behind cover. Instead, they flew directly toward the incoming weapons. Impossible, Admiral Korvax breathed. The human ships moved in ways that seemed to break the laws of physics. They twisted and spun through space, dodging energy, beams that should have been impossible to avoid. Some of them accelerated so quickly that they should have been torn apart by the forces involved. The Defiant performed a maneuver that made Admiral Korvax's eyes hurt to watch. The small ship seemed to fold in half, then stretch like rubber, then snap back to its original shape. The energy beam that should have destroyed it passed right through the space where it had been. "How are they moving like that?" Commander Vex asked. "I don't know," Admiral Korvax admitted. Captain Park's cheerful voice came through the speakers again. "Oh, that's just basic evasive maneuvering. We've got inertial dampeners and gravity manipulators. Makes space combat a lot more interesting when you don't have to worry about things like momentum and acceleration limits." One of the human ships, painted bright red with yellow flames along its sides, flew straight toward a Zephyrian destroyer. Admiral Korvax watched in horror as the human ship rammed directly into the alien vessel's hull. Both ships should have been destroyed. Instead, the human ship passed right through the destroyer as if it weren't there, emerging from the other side completely unharmed. The destroyer, however, began spinning wildly out of control, sparks flying from its damaged systems. "Phase shifting," Captain Park explained helpfully. "We can make our ships exist in multiple dimensions at once. Really useful for getting inside enemy hulls without having to worry about all that pesky armor." More human ships were arriving every second. They appeared from behind asteroids, uncloaked from empty space, and seemed to materialize out of thin air. Each new arrival brought different weapons and tactics that the Zephyrians had never seen before. A sleek black ship fired something that looked like a small metal sphere. The sphere struck a Zephyrian cruiser and seemed to disappear. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the cruiser's own weapons began firing on the ships next to it. "Computer virus," one of the human pilots explained over an open channel. "We've taken control of your friend's targeting system. He's working for us now." Another human ship launched what appeared to be a cloud of metallic dust. The dust settled on several Zephyrian vessels and began eating through their hulls like acid nanobots, Captain Park said when Admiral Korvax demanded an explanation. "Microscopic robots that consume metal and reproduce. Don't worry. We programmed them to shut down after an hour. We're not monsters." But the most terrifying moment came when Admiral Korvax realized that the human ships weren't just fighting randomly. They were working together with a level of coordination that seemed impossible. Ships that had never worked together before moved like parts of a single organism. They shared targeting information, covered each other's weak points, and executed complex maneuvers that required split-second timing. "How are they coordinating so perfectly?" Commander Vex asked. Captain Park answered as if he had heard the question. "Oh, we're all linked through something we call a tactical network. Every human pilot shares information with every other human pilot in real time. It's like having 500 minds thinking as one." Admiral Korvax watched his mighty fleet being systematically dismantled by an enemy that seemed to treat warfare as a form of entertainment. The humans weren't just winning, they were showing off. One human pilot used his ship's gravity drive to create a miniature black hole, then used it to slingshot around the battlefield at impossible speeds. Another pilot somehow convinced a Zephyrian ship's computer to play loud music that made the alien crew dizzy and confused. A third pilot did something that Admiral Korvax would have nightmares about for the rest of his life. The human ship fired a weapon that seemed to slow down time itself. The Zephyrian vessels caught in the beam moved in slow motion while the human ship zipped around them like insects. "Temporal distortion field," Captain Park explained. "We've learned how to manipulate time on a local scale. Pretty neat, right?" Admiral Korvax realized that his fleet was not just losing, it was being humiliated. The humans were capturing his ships without destroying them. disabling weapons without killing crews and demonstrating technologies that shouldn't exist. "Admiral," Commander Vex said quietly, "I recommend we retreat." "Retreat?" Admiral Korvax repeated. "The Zephyrian Empire does not retreat. Sir, we've lost half our fleet in 10 minutes. These humans are not like any enemy we've ever faced." Admiral Korvax looked at his tactical display. Commander Vex was right. Ships that had conquered hundreds of worlds were being swatted aside, like toys. His crew looked terrified, something he had never seen before. Captain Park's voice came through the speakers one more time, but now it carried a different tone. The cheerful friendliness was gone, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "Admiral, Korvax, you came to our solar system and threatened to destroy our home. You pointed weapons at our planet and demanded that we surrender. You made this personal." More human ships were arriving, and these were bigger than the first wave. Massive vessels that dwarfed even the Eternal Dominion appeared from behind Earth's moon, their hulls bristling with weapons that hurt to look at. Admiral Korvax watched in growing horror as more human ships arrived from deeper in the solar system. These weren't the small, fast vessels that had already torn through half his fleet. These were massive warships that made his own flagship look small. The largest ship emerged from behind Earth's moon like a metal mountain coming to life. Its hull was dark gray and covered with weapon ports that glowed with blue energy. Along its side, painted in bold white letters, was a single word: vengeance. "Sir," Commander Vex whispered, "that ship is 3 times the size of our flagship." "Admiral," Korvax's 3 eyes focused on the approaching vessel. "Impossible. No species builds ships that large." A new voice came through the communication channel, calm and professional. "Admiral Korvax, this is Colonel Nina Ross of the human battleship, Vengeance. I'm here to teach you about something we call escalation." The massive ship began to move, and Admiral Korvax realized that size wasn't its most frightening feature. The Vengeance was fast, impossibly fast for something so large. It accelerated toward his fleet like a bullet fired from a gun. "All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel," Admiral Korvax ordered. Every remaining Zephyrian ship turned its weapons toward the approaching human battleship. Energy beams that could melt asteroids struck the Vengeance's hull and simply disappeared. "That's interesting," Colonel Ross said. "You're using directed energy weapons. We used those too, about 50 years ago. Then we figured out something better." The space around the Vengeance began to bend and twist. Admiral Korvax realized the human ship was creating gravitational fields so strong they were warping space itself. "Gravity shields," Colonel Ross explained. "Your energy weapons can't hurt us because they're being absorbed by artificial black holes. But here's the really fun part. The Vengeance fired its own weapons, and Admiral Korvax saw something that would haunt his dreams forever. Instead of energy beams, the human ship launched what appeared to be tiny stars. Each glowing projectile contained the power of a sun compressed into a space no larger than a basketball. The miniature stars struck 3 Zephyrian cruisers and simply erased them from existence. Not destroyed, not blown apart, but completely removed from reality, as if they had never been there. "Stellar compression weapons," Colonel Ross said casually. "We take the nuclear fire from the heart of a star and throw it at our enemies. It's very effective." But the Vengeance wasn't alone. More human ships were arriving every minute, each one demonstrating technologies that shouldn't exist. A sleek silver ship appeared near Admiral Korvax's flagship and began doing something impossible. It was firing in multiple directions at once, hitting targets that were behind it, beside it, and somehow in front of it at the same time. Multi-dimensional targeting, the pilot explained when Admiral Korvax demanded to know how this was possible. "We fire our weapons through folded space. The bullets travel through higher dimensions and come out wherever we want them to." Another human vessel, painted with bright green stripes, launched what looked like harmless metal spheres. The spheres struck several Zephyrian ships and began to multiply. Within seconds, each sphere had become a dozen spheres, then 100, then 1,000. "Self-replicating minds," the pilot announced cheerfully. "They make copies of themselves using the metal from your hulls. Don't worry. We'll turn them off when we're done playing." Admiral Korvax tried to process what he was seeing. These humans weren't just fighting with superior technology. They were fighting with technologies that violated everything he thought he knew about physics. A new voice came through the communication system, different from the others. This one sounded older, more scientific. Admiral Korvax, this is Dr. Amy Clark. I'm what humans call a theoretical physicist. I study the fundamental laws of the universe and figure out how to break them. Admiral Korvax's sensors detected something new approaching his position. It wasn't a ship exactly. It looked more like a collection of metal rings spinning around, each other in impossible patterns. What is that thing? He demanded. That's my laboratory, Dr. Clark replied. I've been experimenting with something we call weaponized science. Would you like a demonstration? The spinning rings suddenly stopped moving. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every Zephyrian ship in the fleet found itself trapped inside. Invisible barriers. They could see out, they could communicate, but they couldn't move or fire their weapons. Localized physics alteration, Dr. Clark explained. I've changed the laws of physics in the space around your ships. In those areas, momentum doesn't work the way it should. Your engines can run all they want, but you won't go anywhere. Admiral Korvax tried to give orders to his fleet, but half his ships couldn't respond. They were trapped in bubbles of altered reality, helpless as floating targets. The thing about humans, Dr. Clark continued, is that we don't just use science to understand the universe. We use it to reshape the universe to suit our needs. Every law of physics is just a suggestion to us. More human ships were arriving, and Admiral Korvax began to realize that Earth hadn't just been defended. It had been turned into a fortress. Ships emerged from hidden bases on asteroids, from camouflaged positions behind planets, from locations that shouldn't have been able to hide anything. A formation of small, fast ships zipped past his flagship, moving in perfect synchronization. As they passed, they fired something that looked like glowing nets. The nets wrapped around several Zephyrian vessels and began to glow brighter. Energy drain weapons, one of the pilots explained. We're borrowing your power to charge our own systems. Thanks for the free energy. But the most disturbing thing wasn't the advanced technology. It was how the humans were using it. They weren't trying to destroy the Zephyrian fleet quickly and efficiently. They were taking their time, experimenting, trying new things. You know what I've always wondered? Asked a human pilot flying a ship that seemed to be made entirely of mirrors. What happens if you fire a gravity beam at a ship that's traveling, faster than light? Don't try it, Steve, Colonel Ross warned. Remember what happened last time you experimented during a battle? That was different, the pilot named Steve replied. I was just testing a temporal displacement field. How was I supposed to know it would send that pirate ship back to the Stone Age? Admiral Korvax realized that these humans were treating his invasion fleet like a testing ground for their experimental weapons. They weren't fighting for their lives. They were having fun. A massive human ship appeared directly above the Eternal Dominion, moving so quietly that the sensors hadn't detected it until it was too late. This ship was different from the others. It was older looking, with scars and battle damage that spoke of countless fights. Admiral Korvax, came a familiar voice. It was Captain Park from the small ship that had first met his fleet. Allow me to introduce you to the human flagship, the Retribution. She's been fighting wars since before your empire was born. The Retribution didn't fire any exotic weapons or demonstrate impossible technologies. Instead, it did something far more frightening. It opened its cargo bays and began deploying smaller ships. Hundreds of them, thousands of them. You see, Captain Park explained, the thing about humans is that we've been preparing for this moment our entire history. Every war we've fought, every weapon we've built, every tactic we've developed, it's all been practice for the day when someone would be stupid enough to threaten our home. The small ships swarmed around the Zephyrian fleet like angry insects, but they weren't attacking. They were doing something worse. They were taking the alien ships apart piece by piece, removing weapons, disabling engines, capturing crew members. We're not going to destroy your fleet, Captain Park said. That would be wasteful. Instead, we're going to take it apart and study it. We want to understand how your technology works so we can build better weapons. Admiral Korvax found himself trapped, on his own bridge as human soldiers materialized around him. They appeared out of thin air, wearing armor that seemed to bend light around it. Teleportation technology, one of the soldiers explained when Admiral Korvax stared at them in shock. We've learned how to move matter instantly across space, very useful for boarding enemy ships. The soldier removed his helmet, revealing a young human face with kind eyes and a friendly smile. Admiral, my name is Lieutenant Commander Steve Walsh. I'm here to escort you to the Retribution. Don't worry, we're not going to hurt you. Why? Admiral Korvax asked. Why don't you simply kill us? Lieutenant Commander Walsh looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Why would we kill you? Dead enemies can't tell their friends about what they've seen here. You're going to be our messengers. As Admiral Korvax was escorted from his bridge, he heard Captain Park's voice one last time. Admiral, when you return to your empire, you're going to tell them exactly what happened here. You're going to explain that humanity isn't a species that can be conquered or intimidated. You're going to make sure they understand that Earth is off limits. The last thing Admiral Korvax saw before being teleported to the human flagship was his mighty fleet, the pride of the Zephyrian Empire, being systematically captured by creatures that treated warfare like an art form. 6 months later, Admiral Korvax stood in the Great Council Chamber on Zephyr Prime, the capital world of the Empire. The massive room was filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy, each one a ruler of countless worlds. 12 thrones, arranged in a circle, dominated the center of the chamber, and on the highest throne sat Emperor Zek, supreme leader of the Zephyrian Empire. Admiral Korvax's scales had lost their shine. His 3 eyes looked tired and haunted. The proud warrior who had conquered 847 worlds now stood before his rulers like a broken creature, trembling as he prepared to give his report. Speak, Emperor Zek commanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. Admiral Korvax's throat felt dry. Your Majesty, the humans released us. They gave us back our ships, our weapons, our crews. They even fixed the damage they had caused during the battle. Confused murmurs rippled through the chamber. Emperor Vel, ruler of the Outer Rim territories, leaned forward on her throne. Released you? Explain this. They captured our entire fleet in less than 1 hour, Admiral Korvax continued. 500 ships, completely disabled. But instead of destroying us or taking us as prisoners, they studied us. They examined our technology, our tactics, our entire way of thinking about warfare. Emperor Zek's massive clawed hand gripped the arm of his throne. And then they sent us home with a message. The chamber fell silent. Admiral Korvax had faced death in countless battles, but standing before the 12 emperors felt more terrifying than anything the humans had done to him. What message? Emperor Zek asked quietly. Admiral Korvax closed his 3 eyes and spoke, the words that had been burned into his memory. That war to humans is not about conquest or territory or resources. It is about proving a point. And the point they wanted to make is that humanity is not a species that can be conquered, subjugated, or intimidated. He opened his eyes and looked directly at Emperor Zek. They are a species that has spent their entire evolutionary history preparing for exactly this moment. Emperor Locke, the youngest of the 12 rulers, laughed harshly. Impossible, no species, could survive constant warfare for millions of years. That's what I thought too, Admiral Korvax replied. But I was wrong. They showed me recordings from their history. Humans have never known peace. They have never known a time when they were not fighting someone or something. He began to pace back and forth, his tail dragging behind him. They have wars for territory, for resources, for ideas, for religion. They have wars against nature, against disease, against their own limitations. They even have wars for entertainment. The emperors exchanged worried glances. Emperor Nyx, ruler of the industrial sectors, spoke up. Surely you exaggerate. What species fights for entertainment? Admiral Korvax stopped pacing and looked at her. They have buildings called museums where they display weapons from every era of their history. They have competitions where they practice fighting each other. They have stories and songs and art, all celebrating warfare and conflict. He pulled out a small device and activated it. Holographic images filled the chamber showing scenes from human history that the aliens had recorded during his capture. "Look at this," Admiral Korvax said, pointing to an image of human soldiers charging across a battlefield. "These creatures are running toward enemy fire. Not away from it. Toward it. They consider this normal behavior." Another image showed a human ship ramming directly into an enemy vessel. "This is from one of their space battles. The pilot deliberately crashed his ship into a larger enemy vessel to save his companions. They call this heroic." Emperor Zek leaned forward, studying the images. "These must be propaganda films designed to make them appear more dangerous than they actually are." "That's what I thought," Admiral Korvax admitted, "until I experienced their warfare firsthand. Your Majesty, they don't fight the way we fight. When we go to war, we use overwhelming force until the enemy surrenders, but humans have a different approach." He activated another set of images, showing the battle in Earth's solar system. "They call it escalation. No matter how much force you use against them, they will find a way to use more force against you." The images showed human ships performing impossible maneuvers using weapons that seemed to break the laws of physics, and demonstrating technologies that shouldn't exist. "They have weapons that manipulate gravity, time, and space itself," Admiral Korvax continued. "They can make their ships exist in multiple dimensions at once. They can alter the laws of physics in localized areas. They treat the fundamental forces of the universe like tools in a workshop." Emperor Zek's voice was barely a whisper. "What do they want from us?" "Nothing," Admiral Korvax replied, and the single word hung in the air like a death sentence. "That's what makes them so terrifying. They don't want our territory, our resources, or our submission. They just want to be left alone." He activated one final hologram, showing President Morrison sitting behind his wooden desk on Earth. The human leader's words filled the chamber. "The Galactic Empire is welcome to exist, as long as it understands that Earth and her colonies are not part of that empire. We're not interested in conquering you, ruling you, or even trading with you. We're perfectly happy to ignore you completely." The president's expression grew serious. "But if you threaten us again, we will respond with the full creativity of a species that has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare, and trust me, you don't want to see what we've learned." The hologram faded, leaving the council chamber in silence. Admiral Korvax stood alone in the center of the room, waiting for his emperors to process what they had heard. "Finally, Emperor," Zek spoke. "Are you certain about this intelligence? Are you sure these humans are as dangerous as you claim?" Admiral Korvax nodded slowly. "Your Majesty, I have conquered 847 worlds for this empire. I have faced every type of enemy imaginable. I have never retreated from a battle, never shown fear in the face of superior numbers." He paused, gathering his courage. "But the humans terrified me. Not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of the way they think about warfare. To them, conflict isn't a tool for achieving goals. It's a way of life." Emperor Vel asked the question they were all thinking. "What do you recommend?" "Complete avoidance," Admiral Korvax said without hesitation. "We should declare their space off limits to all Imperial ships. We should forbid any contact between our species and theirs. We should pretend they don't exist." Emperor Nyx looked skeptical. "You're suggesting that the mighty Zephyrian Empire should run away from a single species?" "I'm suggesting that the Zephyrian Empire should survive," Admiral Korvax replied firmly. "Because if we fight the humans again, there won't be an empire left to rule." 3 days later, Emperor Zek signed the decree that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The document was transmitted to every world in the Empire, every ship in the fleet, every governor and admiral and general who served the Zephyrian cause. By imperial decree, the message read, "The Sol system and all human colonies are to be considered neutral territory. No imperial ship will enter human space. No imperial citizen will make contact with humans. The species known as humanity is to be left alone under penalty of death." But the decree went further than simple avoidance. It included detailed files about human warfare, human technology, and human psychology. It described their weapons, their tactics, and their complete unwillingness to surrender under any circumstances. The message spread beyond the Zephyrian Empire. Other galactic powers heard about the species that had laughed at the mighty Empire's ultimatum, then proceeded to capture their entire invasion fleet without losing a single ship. Within a year, every major civilization in the galaxy had quietly added Earth to their list of places never to visit. Not because humans were aggressive or expansionist, but because they were simply too dangerous to provoke. On Earth, Dr. Amy Clark sat in her laboratory at MIT, working on new theoretical applications of quantum mechanics. On her desk was a coffee mug with a picture of Earth and the words, "Home Sweet Home," printed on the side. She looked up at the stars through her window and smiled. Her latest project involved weaponizing dark matter, though she hoped she'd never have to use it. "I wonder what other empires are out there," she mused aloud, sipping her coffee. "I hope they're smarter than the last ones." The galaxy had learned an important lesson. There was a difference between being peaceful and being harmless. Humanity was definitely peaceful. They had no interest in conquering other worlds or building an empire, but they were absolutely not harmless. And now, every species in the galaxy knew exactly what happened when you mistook one for the other.